Hey everybody, what's going on? This is Sam from Historic Travels and welcome to another video. Okay guys, so hey, today's video is part 2 in my Titanic exploration series. So if you have not watched part 1 yet, I would highly encourage you to do so before you watch this video. I'll have a link for that video in the description below, but long story short, what we're doing is we are using the Titanic game, ROV Titanic, that lets you explore the wreck of the ship as she existed a few years ago when the Magellan team went down and created that digital scan of the wreck. Well, that digital scan is what you can explore within the game, so you can see the ship as she looked when they made that scan. It's incredibly cool. But yeah, what we're doing is we're exploring the wreck, and then I'm talking about why certain parts of the wreck are the way that they are. So we're basically just working our way all on the Titanic, and I'm talking about a lot of the key marks or key landmarks on the wreck. So this video is going to resume right where part 1 left off, as I said. So watch that first. But yeah, with the intro out of the way, let's get into it. Special thanks to Titanic Honor and Glory for providing the sinking animations you're going to see in today's video. Please check out their work in the description below. Alright everybody, well hey, welcome back to my office, and you should be seeing on your screen right now the ROV Titanic game created by Magellan. Now we are picking up exactly where we left off. Right here on the bow of the Titanic, we were overlooking this giant hole that plunges deep into the Titanic itself. And if you watched my last video, you should know what this is. This is the giant opening made in the ship where the grand staircase used to be. So yeah, as you can clearly see, the grand staircase is completely gone. You can see some of the intact decks still like sticking out there. There's a lot of wreckage, but you can tell where the decks are. And you can also see some chandeliers and stuff like that still hanging in their positions and everything. That's kind of cool to see. Now, don't forget, guys, this animation or this scan is extremely brightened up. Like, the real wreck is nothing like this in terms of how bright it is. I'll increase the brightness to the correct level, or lack of brightness, I should say. You can see how dark it is. Even this, I think this is even brighter than what it is on the real Titanic. But yeah. Anyway, so let's change that back so you guys can see what's going on. There we go. Okay. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be continuing to explore the bow section and go over a few areas that we did not cover last time. Now, I'd like to pay some close attention to this area right here, okay? So this area right here is the roof of the Marconi room, where Jack Phillips and Harold Bride sent out the distress signals. Now, if you'll remember a few years ago, there was some people that were, I think it was with RMS Titanic Inc., and they talked about trying to get in here and recover what's left of the ship's radio. And there was tons of false information on the internet during that time saying things like, oh, they can't do that, they're going to cut a hole into the Titanic, they're going to mess up the history. Well, no, they're not. Like, they don't have to cut a hole into, like, the hull or anything like that. They just literally have to get in to this space right here. Like, you can see for yourself that the roof here is collapsing. So, I mean, they really wouldn't have to do much to get into the Marconi wireless room and get what's left of the radio out. It really wouldn't be that big a deal. And if they don't, it's going to be buried when all this crap collapses anyway. So, I mean, like, that's such an iconic piece of the Titanic's history. Like, usually I'm against them recovering artifacts from inside the Titanic. In case you didn't know, the only artifacts they ever recover from Titanic are the ones that were thrown out into the debris field as the ship sank. But I would be okay with them recovering this. I mean, this is just such an iconic piece of the ship's history that I think they should get it. But, I mean, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Okay, so now we're going to be working our way back forward. And I don't think I commented on this last time, but this hole right here, this is where the Titanic's first funnel used to be. You can see some of the ventilation right there and everything, but yep, this is where the funnel once stood. Man, it's so crazy to me seeing, like, with this full brightness, you know, seeing the bow. And remember how in the last episode I talked about how the bow was, like, sloped down due to the way it impacted with the seafloor? Well, you can clearly see it from here. Like, look how, like, bent downward it is. It's absolutely insane. Okay, so the next thing I want to focus on are these two davits. So we've got one davit right here, and we've got another davit right over here, okay? And if you're paying close attention, you'll notice that these davits are in separate positions. So we're going to start off over here. This is the davit on the starboard side, and this is where First Officer William Murdoch was leading the evacuation. Now, the reason why this davit is in the position, like, so this davit is in the position that they would have it in if they were prepping a lifeboat for launch. Okay, this is not how a davit would be if it had lowered a lifeboat. This is the launching position. And the reason why it was cranked into this position is because at the end of the sinking, right here in this big collapse mess, this is the what's left of the officers' quarters. Okay, it's more intact over here. But right around here, where the first funnel used to be, I'll gain some altitude, right here would have been where collapsible lifeboat A was stored. Towards the end of the sinking, the crew pushed collapsible lifeboat A down to the boat deck, and it would have landed right around here, okay? And they thought that they had more time to prep and launch this boat. So the crew began cranking these davits back into the launch position so they could connect collapsible A to it, hoist it over to the ship side, and then lower it down to the bottom, lower it down to the ocean. But what they didn't realize was, see, at that time, the Titanic had a very sharp list to port. So when they were doing all of this, water was already beginning to make its way up onto the Titanic's port side. They just didn't know. So they got this davit cranked back into the launching position, but by the time they went to try to secure it to the davit, it was already too late. The ship took a sudden dive, water came rapidly flooding up the starboard side boat deck, and yeah, because they had already attached some ropes from collapsible A to the davit. They just didn't have time to get into the correct position, and like they had to scramble, like to use they had to use knives and everything to cut the ropes holding this boat to the davit, because this davit actually almost took collapsible lifeboat A down with it. I heard one report, I don't know if it's true or not, but I heard a thing that one officer even pulled out a gun and shot the rope to try to free it. But yeah, it's pretty crazy what happened here. But yep, that's why this davit is in this position on the wreck today. And this davit over here, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think I am. This is the davit that they used to launch collapsible lifeboat D. And collapsible lifeboat D was the last lifeboat to be lowered away. Yeah, this is it. But yeah, collapsible lifeboat D was the last lifeboat to be successfully lowered over the Titanic side. And when it did, like, the water was flooding into the A-deck promenade. Once I get into the right position here, I'll be able to tell you 100% for certain. But yeah, and you can also see how this davit is over the ship's side. That's another way that you can tell that this davit was, like, they launched the lifeboat and then they left it. Yeah, this is collapsible D. So I can tell because of the promenade on its location, but yeah. So, right, I'm going to pretend that I am looking at the ship from the perspective of being in the lifeboat, okay? So here's the davit. I'm sitting in a lifeboat. As this lifeboat was being lowered over the ship's side, like, it would have looked like this to the crew. The water was right about here, okay? So, I mean, like, it was very close to the boat deck. Oh, wait a minute. I think I'm slightly off. I think it was more... Was it here or was it... It was either here or it was right here. Actually, no. I'm, like, fairly certain it was A-deck. But anyway, regardless... When the boat was coming down, there were two men. And they were Huell Warner and, I forget his last name. Was it Stephenson? But yeah, they were walking down the deck and they saw the lifeboat coming down. And it was right about here. And when they saw the boat, the two men were like, oh, let's take a moment and let's get off the ship. So the two men literally walked from the promenade and climbed into the boat. And they just barely escaped Titanic. Like, water was actually coming up onto the promenade deck when they saw this boat. And they just stepped over and got into the boat, and they left the ship. I mean, they just barely made it. But yeah, it's a absolutely insane survival story. Yeah, it was this deck. It's a little bit... It's looking at the wreck, it's easy to get, like, disoriented or confused just from looking at it because of the wreckage. It's still hard to tell sometimes. Okay, moving on. Alright, the next thing we're going to take a look at is something else that's really crazy, and all people who have studied the wreck of the Titanic will probably know what we're going to go see. Captain Smith's bathtub. Yes, you heard me right. You can actually see Captain Smith's bathtub on the wreck of the Titanic today. It is still there. although it's nowhere near as visible as it once was. So Captain Smith's cabin was directly behind the bridge on the starboard side, okay? So if we zoom around, we are actually directly over Captain Smith's cabin right now. It would have been all right here. It's just completely collapsed and everything, okay? But in the past, it was more intact, but right here is what I want to focus on. This is Captain Smith's bathroom, and right there where my laser is pointing, I'll move it so you can see, but just pay attention to this spot right here. That is the corner of Captain Smith's bathtub. That's all that's still visible. Now, in the past, this entire room was a lot more intact, and you could see the tub plain as day. You could see all the piping for the water and everything. Like, it was a lot more intact. But then in between expeditions, when they came back here, they saw that the entire area had collapsed. But yeah, that's Captain Smith's bathtub. And this is where his cabin once was. So this is where Captain Smith was at the time of the collision. And this entire space right here, this is the officers' quarters. This is where the Titanic's officers would have had their bunks. Okay, so we're moving further aft now. Now this area right here, do you see how there's this opening in the ship's decking? Well, believe it or not, this is not here from the breakup. This is not breakup damage. What this is the Titanic's expansion joint. So for those of you that don't know, on a ship superstructure, they have these things called expansion joints. And the whole idea of the expansion joint is to allow the Titanic superstructure to flex and warp as she goes up and down over waves. It keeps it from getting too much tension, basically. You know, it allows it to stay flexible somewhat. Anyway, because the Titanic's bow was being pulled down so deep into the water due to it sinking and everything, it actually forced the expansion joint open, which is why you can see it in this very, very opened up position. And what's crazy enough is that this was commented on by Second Officer Charles Lightoller. He noticed that as water was rapidly coming up the boat deck, he saw the expansion joint open up. So he saw this happen. And then we get down to the wreck and we actually see it. Yeah, he was right. So, I mean, this whole area got ripped just by the sheer weight of all that water trying to drag the Titanic's bow down while the stern was resisting. Pretty crazy stuff. We're just like zigzagging back and forth here. All right. So now we're going to move over. How are we doing? Okay. So now we're going to move over to the Titanic's port side because there's another very big piece of Titanic history over here that I did cover in a video recently. And I'm curious as to how many of you are going to know what I am heading towards. All right, there it is. I see it. All right. Do you see this hole in the ship right here? Okay. What do you think is so special about this opening in the hull? Well, believe it or not, guys, this is where the D-deck gangway door used to be. This is the gangway door that the crew on the Titanic opened up for some reason during the sinking. I mean, well, we have a pretty good idea. Like, Lightoller did tell them to go and open a door, and the whole idea behind opening the door was that they were going to lower lifeboats down, and the idea was to have passengers exit the ship through this opening in the hull and, you know, get into the lifeboats. But then Lightoller never saw the man again. And to this day, we don't know exactly what happened, but we do know that the door was open because when they found the wreck, the door was wide open. But like I said, I did a whole video on that topic. There is a, I have that on my channel, link for it in the description. But yeah, this is the opening where the D-deck gangway door was. Now, when they originally found the wreck, the D-deck gangway door was right here hanging off the ship's side. But since then, it has fallen off and it fell to the bottom of the ocean. But believe it or not, it was actually recovered. And I don't know exactly what museum it's at. Is it the Vegas Museum? I'm not sure. But yeah, anyway, my point is they did recover it. And you can see it. Just got to find out what museum it's at. Pretty crazy. All right, so now we're heading further aft. And we're heading towards the breakup area now. Okay. Now, as we move along, you can see how the hull just begins to collapse. The hull, the decking, everything just begins to fall apart the further and further aft we go. This area right here. All right, that's the grand staircase. And man, I swear, it's like, I look at this stuff all the time, and even then I still get confused about things sometimes just from the different angles. The wreck can be disorienting. This is the remains of the second funnel. So we're passing over the second funnel right now. Now, where is it? Yes, right here. All right, this is the deck. So right here behind me, and I'll pan around so you can see it. This right here is what's left of the Titanic's gymnasium. So grand staircase. So from the grand staircase on the boat deck level, when you came up here, you went up the stairs, you walked through here, there would be a doorway right around here that would take you into the gymnasium. And yeah, this is what's left of the gym. It's just gone. It's just completely gone, with only a few bits and pieces here and there that remain that can tell you that this was the gymnasium. You can see some outlines of the windows here, like where they once were. This area is still relatively intact. And it was also like, now granted this is debated, but I believe that it was right around here where the Titanic's band was located. So the Titanic's, wait, which side am I on? Yeah. Starboard, yeah. Okay. But yes, it was right around here where the Titanic's band was located. And yeah, like they would have been standing right around here. Most of the survivor testimony that talks about where the Titanic's band was during the ship's final moments, they were on the starboard side of the ship. Now, films like the James Cameron film and everything, they often portray them over on the port side. But when you look at the testimony and it says that, hey, the people who were on the starboard side heard the music, that's why I tend to think that they were over here. So, yeah, it was right around here where Wallace Hartley and all them played their final songs. Absolutely sad and heartbreaking. All right, so now we're moving into the full breakup area. This is the part of the ship that was just absolutely decimated by the breakup. Now, some of this damage is also caused by the downblast. The downblast also affected this. But I want you to look. So people like to ask all the time, like what's going to happen to the Titanic as it decays and falls apart? Well, by looking at the breakup area, you can kind of get an idea of what's going to happen to the ship. Because this areas that were more structurally compromised during the sinking are decaying more quickly than areas that weren't. That's why when you go to the front of the ship, the bow part of the bow section looks in pretty good condition. While the closer we get to the breakup area, the more the whole thing is just falling apart. And if you look at the stern, which we will look at in the next episode, you'll see that it's just completely decimated and obliterated. But yeah, now that we're getting over to the breakup area, this is the area of the bow that's more damaged. You can see how it's collapsing. Like, you can see how the hull is popping out here and how it's being flexed and warped. And yeah, this whole area is just, it's completely falling apart. But as the Titanic continues to deteriorate, these areas will get weaker and weaker, and this area will start to collapse first, and then it will just keep spreading forward and everything. And this area will last a long time. Like, this chunk of the ship that shows very little sign of deterioration, I don't think we have to worry about this collapsing for a very, very long time. It will eventually, but basically look at the back of the bow section, and I'll give you an idea of what's going to happen as deterioration continues. But, yeah. And here you can see some of the piping. I mean, it's just, it's hard to tell what things are over here. All right, now look at this. We're going to go down and look here in a minute. But this should just show you how much of the Titanic has collapsed over here towards the back. I mean, look, there's the boat deck. And all of this is just completely collapsed down. And right here are the boilers. So these are the boilers from Boiler Room 2, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, Boiler Room 2. And, like, the entire walling and everything, like the wall here, it got ripped apart by the breakup, but the boilers seem to have stayed in one piece. Like, and they're still in their original positions as far as I can tell. But yeah, these are the boilers for Boiler Room 2, and I don't know if the boilers from Boiler Room 1 were ever lit. There are some stories that they were, some that they weren't. Like, they were never used during the maiden voyage, but there are some stories out there that suggest that Boiler Room 1's boilers were lit during the sinking to help keep the steam pressure up, but I don't know about that, and I don't know if those boilers could have gotten up to temperature before the ship went down, because it takes a while to get these things going. But yep, there's the boilers right there. Can you imagine what it would have been like to be down here working, especially during the sinking? You know, the men who had to stay down here and keep shoveling coal to keep the steam pressure up. And I mean, now, granted, most of them were released. I'm pretty sure it was voluntary, but yeah, men stayed down here keeping those fires going while the evacuation played out. I mean, they had no shot of getting out. You know, if they were down there at the end, it's not like the officers who, you know, they had a shot at swimming away. Those men, they died with a wrench in their hand, or a shovel, you know, just trying to stop the bleeding, I guess you could say. Those men really are don't get me wrong, there were a lot of heroes on the Titanic that night, but if you want me to rate the scale of a hero, I think the men who stayed down in the engine room and the boiler rooms, who knew they had no shot at getting out of there, like, that's a whole other level of hero, you know, I mean, because they knew they had no chance. Absolutely sad and heartbreaking stuff. All right, guys. Well, hey, with that, I think that wraps up part 2 of my Titanic exploration video. Stand by for the closeout. All right, everybody. Well, hey, that concludes part 2 in my Titanic exploration series. I hope you learned a lot from this video, and if you enjoyed it, please be sure to leave it a like. If you're new here, please subscribe to the channel. Thank you guys so much. It really helps out a lot. And yeah, stay tuned for episode 3. Man, I really like making these videos, and it means a lot that all of you enjoy them enough to watch. So thank you guys so much for all your support. I really appreciate it, and see you in the next one.